Sarah Martinez rescued a man from a burning building. When people saw her Navy SEAL tattoo, she became famous. But the government said she was lying, no records existed of her service. She faced years in prison for stolen valor until a top admiral arrived in court with shocking classified documents that proved everything. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The rain hammered against the windows of the police station like angry fists. Sarah Martinez sat in the cold interrogation room, her wrists still red and sore from the tight handcuffs. Her heart pounded against her chest, not from fear, but from deep anger and frustration that burned in her soul. How had her life come to this terrible moment? How had everything gone so wrong? "Ma'am, we need you to understand how serious these charges are," Detective Johnson said, his voice cold and hard. He slid a thick folder across the metal table with a loud slap. "Impersonating a Navy SEAL is a federal crime. Do you understand that? People have gone to prison for many years because of this." Sarah looked up at him with tired, bloodshot eyes. Dark circles surrounded them from lack of sleep and stress. She had been sitting in this small, windowless room for 3 long hours now, trying again and again to explain herself to people who would not listen. People who had already decided she was a liar. Her long black hair was still wet from the heavy rain outside. Water drops fell from the ends onto her simple jeans and plain gray sweater. She looked like any normal woman you might see at a grocery store or coffee shop. Nothing about her appearance suggested the warrior she once was. Nothing showed the battles she had fought or the blood she had spilled for her country. "I never claimed to be anything I wasn't," she whispered, her voice rough and hoarse from repeating the same words over and over like a broken record. "I just wanted to help that man. I just wanted to save his life." Detective Johnson shook his head slowly, like a teacher disappointed in a lying student. "The witnesses say you told them you were a Navy SEAL. Multiple witnesses heard you say this. You were wearing military gear and had a SEAL trident tattoo on your arm. That's enough evidence for us to arrest you and charge you." Sarah's hand moved without thinking to her left shoulder, where under her sweater lay the tattoo that had caused all this trouble. The golden eagle, anchor, and trident symbol that marked her as one of the few, the proud, the elite warriors of the sea. The tattoo that told a story no one would believe. But Detective Johnson didn't know her real story. No one did. No one could know. The truth was locked away in classified files so secret that even she couldn't talk about them. The truth was buried so deep that it might as well not exist at all. The sun was setting over the dangerous mountains of Afghanistan, painting the sky red like spilled blood. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez received the order that would change her life forever. She stood in the military briefing room, surrounded by maps and photos of enemy targets. "Martinez, you ready for this?" her team leader, Chief Petty Officer Williams, asked as they prepared for insertion. His face was painted with black and green camouflage, making him look like a warrior from ancient times. Sarah checked her gear one final time. Her rifle was clean and loaded. Her body armor was tight and secure. Her night vision goggles worked perfectly. At 25 years old, she was one of the youngest female operatives ever selected for the Navy's most elite Special Operations Unit. The path to get here had been brutal and unforgiving. Months of training that broke most men into pieces. Tests of strength and endurance that pushed her body and mind far beyond what she thought was possible. Swimming in ice-cold water until her lips turned blue. Running with heavy packs until her feet bled inside her boots. Learning to fight, to kill, to survive in any situation. Out of 100 candidates who started the program, only 12 had graduated. Sarah was the only woman. "Born ready, Chief," she replied, though her heart was racing like a drum inside her chest. The mission was supposed to be simple and clean. Extract a high-value target who had information about terrorist activities. Get in, grab the man, get out. Nobody gets hurt. Home in time for breakfast. But as their helicopter approached the landing zone through the dark night sky, everything went horribly wrong. The explosion lit up the night like a deadly fireworks show. The rocket-propelled grenade hit their helicopter with tremendous force. Sarah felt herself flying through the air, her body spinning and tumbling. She hit the rocky ground hard, so hard that all the air was knocked from her lungs. When she finally opened her eyes, the helicopter was burning like a giant torch. Twisted metal was scattered everywhere. And half her team was gone forever. "Chief," she called out, crawling toward the burning wreckage on her hands and knees. Her left arm wasn't working right, but she ignored the pain. She found Williams pinned under heavy debris, his leg twisted at an impossible angle. Blood was pooling around his body. "Get out of here, Martinez," he gasped, blood coming from his mouth. "That's a direct order. "Leave me and save yourself." But Sarah couldn't leave him. She would never leave him. That wasn't who she was. That wasn't how she was trained. For the next 6 hours, as enemy fighters surrounded their position, Sarah held them off with everything she had. She used every skill she had learned in training, every trick she knew for staying alive. She dragged Williams to safety behind a large rock. She performed field medicine to stop his bleeding, using her own shirt as bandages. She called in air support on her radio, giving coordinates for rescue helicopters. The bullets flew around her like angry bees. Some came so close she could feel the heat as they passed her face. One bullet tore through her left shoulder, spinning her around. Another hit her in the same shoulder, but she kept fighting. She had to keep fighting. When the rescue team finally arrived with the sunrise, they found Sarah still conscious, still fighting, still protecting her team leader. She had killed 7 enemy fighters and wounded many more. But she had also lost enough blood to kill most people. The doctors later said it was a miracle she survived. The medal ceremony was held in a small, windowless room deep inside the Pentagon. The walls were plain white with no decorations or flags. Only a handful of people attended, all of them sworn to secrecy. Sarah's parents weren't there. They still believed she was stationed in sunny California, doing boring paperwork for the Navy. She had to lie to them. She hated lying to them, but she had no choice. For extraordinary heroism and distinguished service in the face of overwhelming enemy fire, the Admiral read from an official document, his voice echoing in the small room. He pinned the silver star to her chest with careful hands. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez exemplifies the finest traditions of the United States Navy SEALs. The Silver Star Point, one of the highest decorations for valor in combat. Sarah felt proud and sad at the same time. Proud of what she had accomplished, but sad that she could never tell anyone about it. But the mission had cost her more than just blood and pain. The bullet fragments in her shoulder had caused permanent nerve damage that ended her operational career forever. At 26 years old, she was medically retired with full honors and a disability pension. The hardest part wasn't the physical pain that never went away. It was the complete silence she had to live with. "You understand that your service record is classified at the highest levels," the Navy psychiatrist told her during her final evaluation. His office was sterile and cold like a hospital room. "You can never tell anyone about your missions, your unit, or your experiences. Not your family, not your friends, not anyone. That's the price of the work you did for your country." Sarah nodded her head, but inside she was screaming. How do you come home from war when you can't tell anyone you were at war? How do you heal from trauma when you can't talk about what happened to you? Sarah moved back to her hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, trying to build some kind of normal life from the pieces of who she used to be. The desert heat reminded her of Afghanistan, which made sleeping even harder than it already was. She used her GI benefits to study psychology at the local university, hoping to help other veterans deal with their trauma and pain. Maybe if she couldn't heal herself, she could at least help heal others. But keeping her secret ate away at her soul like acid, burning her from the inside out. Her family asked why she walked with a slight limp now. She told them it was from a training accident during basic exercises. Her friends wondered why she sometimes woke up screaming from terrible nightmares, covered in sweat and shaking. She said she had trouble sleeping because of stress. The tattoo on her shoulder remained hidden under long sleeves and high necklines, even in the blazing Arizona heat. It was her only proof of who she really was, of what she had done, of the brothers and sisters she had served with in that burning helicopter. Years passed slowly, like a river of thick mud. Sarah graduated college with honors and started working at a veterans counseling center downtown. She helped Marines deal with PTSD from Iraq. She supported Army soldiers trying to adjust to civilian life after multiple deployments. She guided Air Force personnel through their difficult transitions from military to civilian life. But she could never help herself. She was like a doctor who could cure everyone except herself. "You seem to understand what we're going through better than most counselors," said Mike, a young Marine who had lost his right leg to a roadside bomb in Iraq. He was learning to walk with a prosthetic leg, which was painful and frustrating. "It's like you've actually been there with us. Like you really know what combat is like." Sarah smiled sadly, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. "Everyone fights their own battles in their own way," she said carefully. If only she could tell them the truth. If only she could share her own story and let them know they weren't alone in their pain. If only she could show them her silver star and say, "I understand because I was there too." But the oath of silence was stronger than her desire to help. It was stronger than her need to heal. It started as a completely normal Tuesday morning in spring. Sarah was walking to work along the busy sidewalk, drinking coffee from a paper cup and thinking about her appointments for the day. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and life seemed peaceful and ordinary. Then she heard the screaming. A young woman was standing on the sidewalk, holding a crying baby in her arms. Tears were streaming down her face like a waterfall. "Please, somebody help us. My husband is trapped in there. He can't get out." Sarah looked up and saw thick black smoke pouring from the second-floor windows of a 3-story apartment building. Orange flames were visible through the glass. Fire trucks were still several minutes away, and she could hear a man calling for help from inside the burning building. "Help me. Somebody please help me. I can't breathe." Every instinct that Sarah had learned as a SEAL kicked in immediately. Her training took over completely. She ran toward the burning building without thinking, without hesitation, without fear. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," shouted a police officer who had just arrived on the scene. "It's too dangerous. The fire department will be here soon." But Sarah was already moving, already inside her mission mindset. She found a way into the building through a side entrance, staying low to avoid the thick smoke that burned her eyes and throat. The years of retirement and civilian life hadn't erased her military training. It was still there, buried deep but ready when needed. She moved through the smoke-filled hallway like a ghost, reading the environment, understanding the dangers, finding the safest path through the maze of fire and smoke. The heat was incredible. Felt like being inside an oven. Sweat poured down her face and her clothes stuck to her body. But she kept moving, kept searching, kept following the sound of the man's voice. She found him in an upstairs bedroom, unconscious from smoke inhalation. He was a big man, probably 200 pounds of dead weight. Under normal circumstances, Sarah's injured shoulder wouldn't have been able to handle such a load. But these weren't normal circumstances. This was life or death. She had carried heavier loads through worse conditions in Afghanistan. She got the unconscious man in a fireman's carry across her shoulders and made her way back through the smoke-filled hallway, step by careful step. By the time she emerged from the burning building with the victim, a large crowd had gathered on the street. Fire trucks were just arriving, their sirens wailing like banshees. Paramedics rushed forward to take the unconscious man from her arms. "Who are you?" asked the fire chief, a burly man with kind eyes. "Are you military? Police, AMT?" Sarah hesitated, coughing from the smoke she had inhaled. She was covered in black soot from head to toe. Her clothes were torn and singed from the rescue. Her left shoulder was throbbing with familiar pain from the old bullet wounds, aggravated by carrying the heavy man to safety. "I'm a veteran," she said simply, not wanting to say more. But someone in the crowd had seen her shoulder. When she had carried the unconscious man out of the building, her sleeve had torn completely, revealing part of her tattoo to the world. "Look at her arm," someone shouted excitedly, pointing at her exposed shoulder. "She's got a SEAL trident. She's a Navy SEAL." The word spread through the crowd like wildfire. Within minutes, local news crews were arriving, wanting to interview the heroic female Navy SEAL, who had risked her life to save a complete stranger. Sarah tried to leave quickly, but reporters surrounded her like a pack of hungry wolves. "Is it true you're a Navy SEAL?" asked a young journalist with perfectly styled hair, shoving a microphone in Sarah's soot-covered face. Sarah looked at the cameras, at the growing crowd, at the man she had saved being loaded into an ambulance. His wife was crying with relief and gratitude, holding their baby close to her chest. The man was alive because of what Sarah had done. "I served my country with honor," she said quietly, trying to choose her words carefully. But that wasn't enough for the reporters. They wanted details, they wanted stories, they wanted proof and evidence and quotes they could use. And Sarah, exhausted and emotional from the dangerous rescue, made a terrible mistake. "I was part of a special operations unit," she said, immediately regretting the words as they left her mouth. "I can't talk about the specific details." The story that aired on the evening news called her a heroic female Navy SEAL who risked her own life to save a stranger from a burning building. Social media picked up the story immediately. Within hours, Sarah Martinez was famous across the entire country. People shared her story thousands of times. They called her a hero, an inspiration, a true American patriot. That's when all the trouble started. "There's no record of you in any SEAL teams," Detective Johnson said 3 days later, staring at his computer screen with suspicious eyes. "We've checked with the Navy Department in Washington. We've contacted multiple military databases. They have no Sarah Martinez listed as a SEAL operator anywhere." Sarah's heart sank like a stone thrown into deep water. Of course they didn't have any records. Her service files were classified so deep and so secret that even military databases wouldn't show them. They were buried in compartmentalized intelligence files that most people in the Navy didn't even know existed. "I told you already, my service was classified at the highest levels," she said for what felt like the 100th time. Her voice was getting hoarse from repeating the same explanation over and over. "Ma'am, every single stolen valor case starts with someone claiming their military records are classified," Detective Johnson replied with a tired sigh. "We've heard this exact story from dozens of fake veterans. They all say the same thing. The charges against Sarah were very serious and could ruin her life completely. Impersonating a member of the armed forces was a federal felony. Falsely claiming military decorations could result in years in prison. The federal prosecutor was already talking about making an example of her case." Sarah's court-appointed lawyer was Robert Chin, a young public defender who looked overwhelmed and underprepared. His small office was cluttered with case files and empty coffee cups. "Look, Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. "If you can just admit you made a mistake, tell the court you got caught up in the moment after saving that man's life, they might reduce the charges significantly. Maybe probation instead of prison time." "I can't do that," Sarah said firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. "Because it wouldn't be true. I won't admit to something I didn't do. Then we desperately need proof. Real proof that can be verified. Is there anyone who can confirm your military service? Any documentation at all?" Sarah thought about Chief Williams, about her commanding officer, about the other members of her team who had survived that terrible night in Afghanistan. But they were all bound by the same secrecy agreements she was. Speaking out about classified operations would cost them their careers, their military pensions, maybe even their freedom. The military took secrecy very seriously. People had gone to prison for revealing much less sensitive information. "I can't ask them to break their oaths for me," she said sadly. "I won't destroy their lives to save my own." The media coverage changed completely once the investigation became public. The same reporters who had called Sarah a hero now labeled her a fraud and a liar. The same news stations that had praised her courage now questioned everything about her story. Online forums dedicated to exposing stolen valor picked apart every detail of her rescue story. They analyzed photos of her tattoo, compared her physical appearance to known female service members, and declared her a fake based on their amateur investigations. Her photo was shared thousands of times with captions like, "Fake SEAL claims heroism," and "Another stolen valor criminal exposed." The comments were brutal and heartless. Sarah lost her job at the Veterans Counseling Center. Her boss called her into his office with a heavy heart. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but we can't keep you employed here while these charges are pending," he said, unable to look her in the eyes. "It would hurt our reputation and our funding. The other veterans we serve need to trust us." Her landlord asked her to move out of her apartment. Old friends stopped calling and returning her messages. People who had known her for years suddenly treated her like a stranger. But the worst part was the emails and messages from real veterans, expressing their anger and sense of betrayal. These were men and women she had served alongside in spirit, people whose battles and trauma she understood better than they could possibly know. Now they hated her with a passion that burned like fire. "You're a complete disgrace to the uniform and everything it represents," one email read. "Real SEALs died earning that trident. You make me sick to my stomach. I hope you rot in prison. How dare you steal our honor and our sacrifices for your own personal gain," wrote another veteran. "You are lower than dirt." Each message felt like a knife being twisted in her heart. If only they knew the truth about what she had really done for her country. If only they knew about the bullets she had taken, the blood she had spilled, the nightmares she still had every single night. The federal courthouse was packed with reporters, photographers, and protesters on the first day of Sarah's trial. Some people carried signs supporting her, believing in her innocence. Others carried signs demanding justice for stolen valor, wanting to see her punished severely. Sarah walked through the angry crowd with her head held high, but inside she was breaking into a million pieces. She wore a simple black dress and tried to look dignified despite everything that was happening to her. The prosecutor was District Attorney Margaret Foster, a woman known for being thorough, relentless, and unforgiving in high-profile cases. She had built her career on putting criminals behind bars and had no intention of losing this case. Foster brought in expert witnesses who testified about the extreme rarity of female SEALs in classified units. She presented evidence about the rigorous documentation required for such elite military positions. She made Sarah look like an obvious liar who had been caught red-handed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Foster said during her opening statement, pointing an accusing finger directly at Sarah, "this is a case about lies and deception. About a woman who saw an opportunity to be a hero and took it, regardless of the cost, to real service members who earned their honors through actual blood and sacrifice. Sarah's lawyer did his best with what little he had to work with, but what could he really say? The evidence seemed completely overwhelming. No official records anywhere. No verifiable witnesses who could testify on her behalf. Just Sarah's word against the entire U.S. Navy bureaucracy. The tattoo became a central piece of evidence in the prosecution's case. A Navy expert testified that while the basic design was accurate to SEAL traditions, anyone could get such a tattoo at any tattoo shop in the country for a few $100s. The defendant's tattoo proves absolutely nothing except that she was willing to permanently mark her body to support her elaborate deception, Prosecutor Foster argued to the jury. This tattoo is nothing more than expensive body art designed to fool people. Sarah sat at the defendant's table and watched as her entire life was dissected and dismissed piece by piece. Character witnesses spoke about her dedicated work with veterans over the years, her obvious bravery during the apartment building fire, and her general reputation for honesty and integrity in the community. But none of it was enough to overcome the complete lack of official documentation that could prove her military service. On the third day of the trial, as Sarah was beginning to lose all hope of proving her innocence, something completely unexpected happened that changed everything. Sarah was sitting alone in the courthouse hallway during a lunch recess, staring at the floor and trying not to cry. That's when she saw him walking down the corridor with 2 Navy officers flanking him like bodyguards. Admiral James Hawthorne was older than she remembered from that day in the Pentagon 5 years ago. His hair was completely gray now and his face showed more lines from years of stress and responsibility. But she recognized him immediately. He had been the one to pin the Silver Star medal on her chest all those years ago in that small, secret room. Their eyes met across the busy hallway. For a long moment, neither of them moved or spoke. Then the Admiral walked slowly over to where Sarah was sitting on a hard wooden bench. "Lieutenant Martinez," he said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "Sir," Sarah replied automatically, standing up immediately out of ingrained military habit and respect. "I heard about your legal situation through certain channels. I'm very sorry it took me so long to get here." He looked at her with kind but tired eyes that had seen too much war and too much suffering. "The Navy doesn't abandon its own people. We just sometimes take too long to remember that important principle." When court resumed after lunch, the Admiral asked to speak privately with the judge. Sarah watched from her seat as they had a long, intense whispered conversation at the bench. The prosecutor looked confused and worried. Sarah's defense attorney looked hopeful for the first time in weeks. "Your Honor," the Admiral said, now addressing the full courtroom in his clear, commanding voice, "I need to request a brief recess to make some urgent phone calls to Washington, D.C. There are some serious classification issues that need to be resolved at the highest levels before this trial can continue properly." The judge, clearly impressed by the Admiral's presence and authority, agreed immediately. Court was adjourned until the following day. That night, Sarah barely slept at all, wondering what would happen next. The next morning, the atmosphere in the courtroom was completely different. Military officials in dress uniforms filled the gallery. Serious-looking people in expensive suits whispered into phones and carried briefcases marked with security classifications. Sarah could feel the tension and importance in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Admiral Hawthorne took the witness stand carrying a thick folder of documents that had been sealed with official government stamps until that very morning. "Please state your name and position for the official court record," Sarah's defense attorney said. "Admiral James Hawthorne, United States Navy, currently serving as Director of Special Operations for Naval Special Warfare Command." "Admiral, do you personally know the defendant, Sarah Martinez?" "I do know her, yes. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez served directly under my command in a highly classified Special Operations unit from January 2018 to September 2019. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. The prosecutor jumped to her feet like she had been shot. "Objection, Your Honor. There's absolutely no record of any such military service." "Your Honor," the Admiral said with complete calm and authority, "with the express written permission of the Secretary of the Navy and the Department of Defense, I am now authorized to declassify certain specific aspects of Lieutenant Martinez's military service record for the sole purpose of these legal proceedings." He opened the thick folder with careful hands and began to read from official military documents. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was selected for Navy Special Warfare Unit 7 in January 2018 after completing the most rigorous training program in the U.S. military. She completed all required training with distinction and was deployed on 6 highly classified missions over an 18-month period in Afghanistan and other locations. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face for the first time in years. After all these years of painful silence, someone was finally telling her real story in public. On her final combat mission, the Admiral continued reading, Lieutenant Martinez displayed extraordinary heroism under overwhelming enemy fire, saving the life of her team leader and successfully holding off enemy combatants for over 6 hours while severely wounded herself. He looked up from the documents and spoke directly to the jury. Lieutenant Martinez was subsequently awarded the Silver Star Medal for her heroic actions in combat. She was medically retired in September 2019 due to permanent injuries sustained during that mission. Her complete service record was classified at the highest possible levels due to the extremely sensitive nature of her unit's operations. The Admiral's voice grew stronger and more passionate. Lieutenant Martinez never once violated her oath of secrecy, not even when facing federal criminal charges. She never revealed any classified information whatsoever. She simply tried to live with the tremendous burden of having served her country in complete silence. He reached into his uniform jacket and carefully pulled out a small wooden presentation box. This is Lieutenant Martinez's Silver Star Medal, which she was never allowed to display publicly until this very moment. The Admiral walked over to Sarah's table and gently placed the box in her trembling hands. "Thank you for your service and your sacrifice, Lieutenant. I'm deeply sorry it took the United States Navy so long to have your back when you needed us most." "Now, regarding the defendant's tattoo that has been questioned," the Admiral said, returning to the witness stand. He rolled up his own uniform sleeve, revealing an identical trident design on his forearm that looked exactly like Sarah's. "This is not a simple decoration that any sailor can earn or any tattoo shop can replicate accurately," he explained to the fascinated jury. "This specific design, with these very particular details and modifications, is only given to members of our most highly classified special operations units." A large photograph of Sarah's tattoo was displayed on the courtroom screen for everyone to see clearly. "Look closely at these small details," the Admiral said, using a laser pointer to highlight specific elements. "See these tiny numbers here, barely visible unless you know exactly what to look for? That's Lieutenant Martinez's specific unit designation number. And this small anchor modification here? That indicates her particular mission classification level." He turned to face the jury directly. "These precise details are not available to the general public. They are not posted on the internet or in any reference books. They cannot be replicated by any civilian tattoo artist because they don't know these secret specifications exist." The Admiral's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "That tattoo is completely authentic because Sarah Martinez is completely authentic. She earned every single line of that design through blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifice for her country in ways that most Americans will never know or understand." The prosecutor had no questions for the Admiral. What could she possibly ask? The evidence was now overwhelming, and it came directly from the highest levels of the United States Navy. The jury deliberated for exactly 17 minutes before returning to the courtroom. "We find the defendant not guilty on all charges," the jury foreman announced. The courtroom erupted in thunderous applause and cheers. Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief and overwhelming emotion. Years of pain and silence and fear finally came pouring out of her. Admiral Hawthorne came over and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, just like he had done when he pinned the Silver Star on her chest years ago. "It's finally over, Lieutenant. You're completely free now," he said with a warm smile. "And more importantly, you're finally free to be proud of who you are and what you accomplished." But this victory was about much more than just the legal proceedings. For the first time in 5 long years, Sarah felt like herself again. She was no longer carrying her terrible secrets alone in darkness. 6 months later, Sarah stood confidently in front of a packed auditorium at the main Veterans Administration Hospital. She was wearing her dress blue Navy uniform for the first time since her medical retirement, with her Silver Star Medal proudly displayed on her chest where it belonged. "My name is Sarah Martinez," she began, her voice strong and clear, "and I am a United States Navy SEAL." The audience of hundreds of veterans and their families listened in complete, respectful silence as Sarah told her story, her real, complete story, for the first time in public. She talked about the classified missions she still couldn't discuss in detail. She spoke about the brotherhood and sisterhood she had found and lost in the military. She described the tremendous struggle of coming home to enforce silence while carrying the invisible wounds of war. "I know that many of you are carrying secrets of your own," she said, looking out at the faces in the audience. Maybe not classified military operations, but the kind of painful experiences that are very hard to share with people who weren't there with you. I want you to know that your service matters deeply, even when no one else around you understands what you've been through. After her emotional speech, a long line of veterans waited patiently to talk with her personally. Marines who had served multiple tours in Iraq, soldiers who had fought in the mountains of Afghanistan, sailors who had spent long months underwater in nuclear submarines, Air Force pilots who had flown dangerous missions over hostile territory. Each person had their own unique story of sacrifice, service, and the difficult transition back to civilian life. "Thank you for showing all of us that it's okay to be proud of what we did over there," said a young woman who had been a combat medic in Iraq. "Even when we can't talk about all the details of what we experienced." Sarah smiled warmly and shook her hand. "We all served our country with honor and integrity. That's something no one can ever take away from us, no matter what happens." Today, Sarah Martinez runs a specialized counseling program designed specifically for veterans of classified operations and special missions. Her clients are men and women who served their country in ways they can never fully discuss with their families or friends, carrying the heavy weight of necessary secrets. The tattoo on her shoulder is no longer hidden under long sleeves and high collars. It's now a visible reminder of who she is and what she accomplished through dedication and sacrifice. But more than that, it has become a powerful symbol of integrity, the courage and strength to endure persecution and false accusations rather than betray a sacred oath. Sometimes Sarah thinks back to that terrible day in the police interrogation room, when Detective Johnson told her that impersonating a Navy SEAL was a serious federal crime. He was absolutely right about one thing: it is indeed a very serious crime to pretend to be something you're not. But Sarah Martinez never pretended to be anything other than exactly what she was. A true warrior who served with honor, who saved lives in combat and continued saving lives long after the shooting stopped and the wars ended. The Admiral was right too in the end. That tattoo was completely authentic. Just like the remarkable woman who wore it with pride.